It started as one of those moments nobody expects to spiral. A normal afternoon in a quiet British town where people know each other by face, not by name. Where confidence is measured by restraint, not volume. And that's exactly why no one paid much attention when the American walked in. At first, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. He stood out immediately, not because of what he wore, but because of how he carried himself. Shoulders wide, voice already louder than it needed to be. The kind of energy that fills a room before the person even speaks. He wasn't trying to blend in. He wasn't curious. He was convinced he already understood how things worked here. Across the room was a local Brit, mid-30s, calm posture, relaxed. The kind of person who doesn't scan a room looking for dominance, because he doesn't need to. He'd grown up here. This was his town. His accent didn't shift when he spoke. His tone never rose. And that, strangely enough, is what made him the target. The American mistook quiet for weakness. It began with comments that sounded like jokes if you didn't listen too closely. Little digs about how slow things were, how small the place felt, how people here didn't seem to move with purpose. The Brit smiled politely, nodded once or twice, said very little. In the UK, that's often a signal. A subtle boundary, a warning, wrapped in manners. But the American didn't recognize it. He leaned in further, louder now, making the conversation public, talking about how back home this wouldn't fly, how people would have spoken up already, how he wasn't used to people being so passive. There it was, the assumption, the belief that confidence only comes in one flavor, and that his was the original. A few locals noticed. No one intervened. Not yet. In British culture, escalation isn't rushed. People observe. They let things reveal themselves. The Brit finally responded, not defensively, not aggressively, just calmly. He corrected one small detail the American had gotten wrong about the town. Nothing personal, just a fact. The American laughed, a short, dismissive laugh, the kind meant to establish hierarchy. And then he pushed. He questioned the Brit's intelligence, not directly, but indirectly enough that everyone heard it. A remark about education, about thinking smaller, about how people here probably didn't get many opportunities. It was said with a smile, but the intent landed heavy. That's when the room changed. You could feel it. The shift wasn't loud. No gasps, no shouting, just silence. The kind that lets someone keep talking long enough to embarrass themselves. The Brit didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult him back. He simply asked a question. A question about local customs, about rules, about how things are done here, socially, legally, culturally. The American answered confidently. Wrongly. Very wrongly. He assumed British politeness meant flexibility, that rules were suggestions, that if you spoke firmly enough, someone would bend. That mindset might work elsewhere. It doesn't work in a British hometown where everyone knows the lines and respects them. The Brit gently corrected him again, this time with receipts, names, context, history. Not bragging, just explaining. The American tried to interrupt. The Brit let him, then finished his sentence anyway. That's when the American realized something was off. People around them weren't siding with him. They weren't impressed. They weren't entertained. They were quietly aligning with the local, with the calm one, with the person who hadn't needed to prove anything. The American doubled down. That's what confidence does when it's challenged. It gets louder. He accused the Brit of being smug, of hiding behind politeness, of thinking he was better. The Brit smiled, just slightly, and then came the moment that flipped everything. He pointed out, very casually, that the American wasn't just being rude. He was breaking a local rule, not a dramatic one, not a law you'd expect to matter, but one everyone there took seriously. A rule rooted in respect, not authority. The American laughed again, said it was stupid, said it didn't matter. That's when someone else spoke up. Then another. Then another. Not aggressively, not emotionally, just confirming what the Brit had said. The American looked around for support and found none. Suddenly, he wasn't the dominant voice. He was the outsider who'd misunderstood the room, misread the culture, mistaken politeness for submission. His tone shifted, defensive now. He accused everyone of ganging up on him, of being soft, of not being able to handle honesty. But honesty wasn't the problem. The problem was arrogance. The Brit didn't gloat. He didn't lecture. He ended it with one sentence. Quiet, measured, devastating in its simplicity. A reminder that being in someone else's hometown means you're a guest. And guests don't set the rules. Silence again. The American didn't respond immediately. He couldn't. The confidence he walked in with had nowhere to land. No one challenged him aggressively. No one insulted him. And that's what made it worse. He left shortly after, not storming out, not defeated dramatically, just smaller, quieter. After he was gone, conversation resumed. Calmly, normally, as if nothing unusual had happened, because to the locals it hadn't. They'd seen this before. Different accents, same mistake. What made this moment stick wasn't the confrontation, it was the contrast. American confidence often thrives on volume, assertion, presence. British confidence lives in understatement, boundaries, and collective understanding. When those two clash, especially on British soil, one often mistakes restraint for weakness and pays for it. The lesson isn't that one culture is better than the other. It's that confidence without awareness becomes arrogance very quickly. And nowhere does that become clearer than when someone tries to dominate a place that quietly knows exactly who it is. If you've ever traveled abroad and assumed your way was the right way, this story probably feels uncomfortable. That's a good thing, because humility travels better than confidence ever will. And if you've ever watched someone talk themselves into embarrassment, without anyone raising their voice, you already know how powerful calm can be. So the next time you find yourself in someone else's hometown, remember this. The loudest person in the room is rarely the one in control. And if you've seen a moment like this yourself, or lived through one, drop it in the comments. These stories always reveal more than they seem. Because sometimes, the biggest reality check doesn't come with shouting, it comes with silence. But the story didn't actually end when the American walked out. That's the part most people don't see, and it's where the lesson gets even sharper. Because once he stepped outside, reality hit harder than anything that had been said inside. In a small British town, exits don't mean escapes. People notice. Word travels quietly, efficiently, and without exaggeration. Not through gossip, but through shared understanding. By the time the American realized he'd misjudged the situation, the town had already categorized him. Not as a villain, not as a threat, but as someone who didn't get it. And that's worse. Later that evening, he tried again. Different setting. Same confidence, though this time it was thinner, less performative, more cautious. He attempted to explain himself, framing it as a misunderstanding, maybe even a cultural mix-up. And to be fair, that part was true, but explanations only work when they come with humility. What he offered instead was justification. The locals listened. They always do. But listening doesn't mean agreeing. The Brit from earlier didn't confront him again. He didn't need to. In British culture, once the line has been drawn, it doesn't get redrawn for comfort. The Americans started to notice the shift. Service became colder. Conversations shorter. Not rude, just distant. No one argued with him anymore. No one challenged him. And that's when it sank in. He'd lost social access. Not through punishment, but through quiet exclusion. That's the power of social rules in the UK. They don't shout, they don't threaten. They simply close. By the next day, the American had adjusted his tone completely. Softer, more observant, less certain. He asked questions instead of making statements. And slowly, very slowly, the atmosphere changed. Not back to where it was, but enough to function. What humbled him wasn't embarrassment, it was irrelevance. He realized that confidence doesn't travel well unless it adapts. That what feels like strength in one country can feel like disrespect in another. And that trying to dominate a space where you don't understand the rhythm only isolates you faster. The Brit? He never mentioned it again. Because for him, the moment had already passed. The lesson had been delivered. No victory lap required. And that's the part people miss when they compare Americans and Brits. One culture values expression, the other values restraint. When those values clash, the outcome isn't loud, it's decisive. So if there's a takeaway here, it's this. When you're abroad,